Greetings, my name is JC,
And I'm Ian.
and this is the Gamer's Gaiden. And this week, in honor of the school year starting, we decided that today we would talk about school as a setting in video games. But before that, I would just like to let people know about our socials. We have a Twitter account at Gamers Gaiden. We also have a Facebook page. And yeah, if you want to know what the links are, they're both in the description. And if you go to the main page, they're on the banner, which is up at the top, and the buttons within the banner. But before we get into the segments, Ian, you have a new announcement to make.
Yeah, I have started my own show because, I'm special. Each week I'm going to kind of dig into the discount sections of the various e-shops and hopefully find a gem.
Yep.
Maybe find some garbage, but hopefully a gem. Yeah, so that's going to be going up every Tuesday. For those who are in the know, you already watched it yesterday.
Yeah, so Tuesdays. That sounds really cool. And what's the name of the segment?
I'm still workshopping some titles.
All right, fair enough. Cool. Besides that, what have you been playing this week?
Well, again, for those that watched, you know one of the things I've been playing this week. So
Fair enough.
if you haven't, go watch that now. Other than that, I've actually been playing some WoW.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, JC.
That's my fault. And, well, with that, I got to go back and play WoW. So
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
see you next week. So you've been playing Final Fantasy VIII, though.
Yeah,
so
I
maybe
did.
we should really talk about that and do the episode.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so
It kind of makes a little bit of sense. I haven't played a ton of it so far, just because it's been a crazy week, and someone got me playing WoW Classic. But yeah, I did get probably about 45 minutes to an hour into the Final Fantasy VIII HD remake.
right.
And man, the character models are beautiful.
Yeah, I saw some like videos and comparisons. It looks like they did a very, very good job with the model monsters and the character monsters and stuff like that.
Yeah, the backgrounds aren't great.
Yeah, I heard that they actually lost the original prints of the artwork for 7, 8, and potentially 9. So they're basically just upscaling the existing images. But what's weird is that there's some fans out there that have developed like technology in order to upscale like 7, for example.
Yeah, I watched a
And
whole thing on someone doing that with 7, and it really does make a difference. So I don't know,
yeah.
especially with taking the time to do this HD remaster, because really,
Mm-hmm.
like, nobody was screaming for this aside from me.
Mm-hmm.
So
There's a few FF8 fans out there that like 8 the best out of
yeah,
the
there's like
urban
15 of
fantasy
us.
games.
There's
But
not even enough that we could have a convention.
right.
Um,
But the thing is that like those fan patches, in my opinion, generally look a little bit better. And I'm curious if they didn't actually like, I don't know, sue them and steal it or license it out from them, or
yeah,
because like for example, Sega hired Christian Whitehead to make Sonic Mania, and he just made like a fan project, right? So they could have hired somebody outsourced and stuff like that from the community, or they could have pulled a Nintendo with Metroid 2. Like, like I wouldn't have liked them if they would have done that. Obviously, that's not something that I would be a fan of. But there is technology and some people out there that have done it, and they just kind of interlaced and doubled it or something. It looks
yeah.
like, I don't know.
I mean, aside from some of the like, I guess visual or background gripes, because the character models do look really polished.
Yeah, they're fantastic,
They look really nice.
and they're not going to do a full remake like 7.
No,
so
it's
if
not.
they
It
do
will
that, it's
never
going to
get that
be
treatment.
30 years from now. So
And well, it'll just not happen. It doesn't have the same amount of love. But I mean, outside of that, the gameplay's great. It does feature a lot of the what I would call time-saving stuff that they
right.
had in 7.
Are is there any new time saving features, or are they the same time saving features?
They're the exact same things. You've
Okay.
got the like you can click in the one thumbstick to go to like 3 times speed. You can click in the other one to it's max it's constant limit
Right.
or
Yeah, constant limit break.
is it limit break? I
Well,
can't
it's
remember what they
not, but
call
yeah,
it in 8. Um and you click both of them to stop all random encounters.
Cool.
So it's kind of nice if you're just trying to get through a section. It really does save a lot of time. The like
Yeah,
3 times speed and the no encounters.
for sure. And if you turn on your limit bar complete in 8, it basically eliminates the need for the aura potion. So you don't have to actually grind those items out. So it would help you in that regard as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because like you actually get the timing a little bit better on the trigger because they still have those
Yeah.
in there. Um, yeah, no, I've enjoyed what little time I've spent with it. I look
Hmm.
forward to spending more, playing a lot of Triple Triad,
Yeah.
and
That's my favorite version of Triple Triad, to be honest with you. It's
it's
it's simple, it's to the point, and it's just fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's thoroughly enjoyable. But I'll keep you guys posted, and maybe I'll do a full review on it when I do get a chance to finish it.
Cool.
But that kind of leads us right into
This week's segment. So yeah, school is a setting in video games. First we wanted to talk about kind of what we think about the setting. And I think it's a fun setting, but I didn't necessarily like school myself. But it's a decent actual topic. It seems to be more interesting in the aspects that you actually are in a type of school that isn't common, whether it be like a foreign school, like a Japanese school or something like that, because the school system works completely different there, or it's a
or like a
private
boarding
school.
school.
Yeah, exactly. Because like we went to public school, and that's kind of my opinions on the setting. There are definitely really, really great games that are made in this setting, but there's certainly not that many of them.
What's kind of neat is that it gives you an opportunity, especially as someone kind of like yourself. I didn't have the greatest experience in high school. I had fun.
Hmm.
They weren't like the dark ages, but
Yeah,
uh, it wasn't quite the same as a lot of these experiences. I can still have an interesting experience with that setting
yeah.
while being like completely removed from it.
Hmm.
And it also gives you an opportunity as we're older
Hmm.
to look at all the situations very differently.
Yeah, exactly. Especially that retrospective look on things. You see things that you didn't necessarily see as a teenager, and it makes your reactions to certain things that happen in some of these school games like Bully or Life is Strange a lot differently. Because it's like, why are
Exactly.
you doing that? Like, you're so stupid. It's like, yeah, well, no, I was kind of that dumb too.
Yeah,
So
you're
I
18.
learned from those mistakes.
And hopefully you will too.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, one of the main reasons why I didn't necessarily think that the school in my life was as interesting as some of these schools is because there weren't either as many extracurricular activities that exist in these like fantasy schools from the games, or specific specialty programs, like the photography class at Blackwell or something like that. It wasn't something that was available to me.
Yeah, like I
So
think we had one art class,
yeah.
which was art.
And we had one graphic design course actually,
Oh, okay.
but
There you go.
yeah, our year might have been the first instance of it too. So it was kind of interesting. The teacher was cool, but yeah. Anyway, so let's go into why we think that the premise of schools and video games and that genre kind of isn't really used as much.
Well, I find it is used. It's just used a lot more in Japan,
Hmm.
and I kind of feel like in North America we have less attachments. We like school a lot less over here.
Yeah, there's definitely a very different outlook on school from a North American perspective than a Japanese perspective. I think
Yeah.
even like in Europe, they look at school a lot differently too.
Oh, absolutely. It's wherever you go, the education system's so different.
Hmm. And I'm certain that like if we had went to some sort of private or specialty school or something like that, our circumstances would be a lot different. But
True.
the our outlook on school might have been a little bit different too.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Like a lot of these games, you're playing something where you're spending a lot of your time at the school.
Hmm.
Whether it's like you mentioned Bully, where you live at the school,
Hmm.
or like
Yeah, because it's a boarding school,
it's a
right?
boarding
Yeah.
school, or even like Life is Strange, where they have the dorms
Hmm.
on campus, and then you've got like the Persona games, where you spend most of your time at school.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, definitely due to the Japanese culture, they spend a lot of time after school hours at school due to their clubs and different extracurricular activities that they do. And I find a reason why we look at games that have schools in them a little bit more interesting is because there's different things that we didn't necessarily as a player get to experience
Yeah.
that they've basically uses the setting, and it allows us to basically use that outlet to experience like potentially like hanging out with people within like these different aspects. It's kind of like one of the reasons why I like slice of life anime is because it's kind of like a very similar I have a very similar outlook on it that I do on like the Persona series, for example, because
Yeah.
they're very they're parallels to each other. They're very similar. They
Yeah, they're
definitely
very like
borrow off each other.
relationship
Yeah.
based. I mean like I don't mean like dating relationship.
It's friendships and
Yeah,
your social experiences with different
exactly.
friends and stuff like that, because you have like a friendship meter, so to speak, or whatever. And some people may like you and some people may not. But yeah, it's definitely really interesting that we're able to actually, have those experiences through the games and potentially have a different outlook on it. I think the main reason why is because traditionally in North America, schools, like the public school system, is viewed as fairly bland. And as a proof point, any non-Japanese games that take place at a school are generally private schools,
Yep.
and it leads to a more interesting experience, mainly because it's something that we didn't necessarily experience. They tend to do this a lot in movies as well, and if it's not necessarily the main focus of it in a North American setting, a lot of the time it'll be mainly story or character based that kind of makes the game interesting, and it's more of a backdrop. But in Japan, the interesting thing about there is like they're almost they don't have to be part of a social club or like an after school club and stuff like that, but it's almost assumed that you're going to be. The culture essentially basically it's the norm there.
Yeah, like it's greatly encouraged that you
Exactly.
take part in a club. Whereas like for us, I know like making a club at school, like
Hmm.
you had to like find a teacher that liked you
Yeah.
and then hope that they liked the idea
Hmm.
and would like sign off on it.
Yeah, I remember wanting to create a Magic the Gathering club at my high school, and they wouldn't let me do it because they're like, "No, you should go like and stay in the cafeteria and eat your lunch, and then go back to class." And I'm like, "Okay, this sucks." And the Japanese school student spends a lot more time in school, whether it be these extracurricular activities and stuff like that, which kind of attests to why the premise kind of makes more sense than like North American um, school. Though, like I will say, like I'm sure that Persona 5 would have been interesting as well if it took place in like Toronto or Los Angeles or something like that. If they found an actual interesting city to play in, that definitely would have been cool. But just the perception of the whole entire topic of it, just it seems to have some sort of negative stigmatism to it. So I feel that developers tend to shy away from it, and if they are using it, it's for different reasons and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it would still be a private school.
Hmm.
You tend to not see public schools used
Yeah.
very often in any form,
Hmm.
really.
Yeah. And then again, like what's interesting is like to go on, like they could potentially use public schools a little bit more. The reason why I say that is because film has been very successful in doing that in the past. Because The Breakfast Club and 10 Things I Hate About You are two good examples of movies that take place like during like school days. They made it interesting, and if it can be interesting in one medium, it can be interesting and different. They just kind of
Oh,
have to find a
uh,
way to make it interesting to the player, I find.
absolutely. And I don't even know if it's necessarily that they couldn't find a way to make it interesting.
Hmm.
It really seems in North America we kind of like shy away from putting things in school because of like violence. I mean, you mentioned 10 Things I Hate About You. Like a
Hmm.
month after that came out was Columbine.
Yeah, that's very true. So let's go into how the schools are used as a setting within video games. And we find that either the school setting is either used as either the main premise of the game or as a backdrop. And whenever it's used as the main premise, generally, as we've mentioned previously, it's either at a Japanese school or like a private or boarding school. And if it's the main premise, generally what that means is that it's the focal point of where the interactions of the main characters in the story happen, because I find usually it's kind of those are the three pillars of the setting of the game. It's where it's taking place, which is the school in this case, the characters and NPCs in it, and then the overall story that's happening within that place is generally the three main archetypes that are used within this genre. And if it's used as a backdrop of a game, it's generally not the main focus, and it's kind of just either a portion of the game or the level of the game.
Yeah, and you kind of see a lot of that with horror in
Yeah,
particular. Kind of like Midwich Elementary and Silent Hill.
yeah, it's a really good example.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Hmm.
Yeah, you tend to see that a lot in horror
Hmm.
specifically. Um, I mean, a great example would be Midwich Elementary in Silent Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a way of taking something that's so mundane, like a school.
Hmm.
And generally, these are North American schools too.
Yeah,
A very bland, just corridors and classrooms,
with
and then
lockers.
with lockers lining the hallways, and they make it terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting that you say that because, uh, like in these games, if it's a back level, it just it's kind of just used kind of as like an afterthought, really, and I just find that interesting.
I think the school is a great setting for horror,
Mm-hmm.
because for a lot of us, we do have at least some. I don't want to say necessarily bad memories of school, but you do have some anxiety
Yeah, it's a place that we
related
didn't
to
really
that.
want to go to.
Yeah, you didn't want to be there, and
Mm-hmm.
now you have to be there for some purpose.
Yeah.
The lockers and doorways, they all really lend to unknown. Like you don't know if things are going to jump out of the lockers or the door, like pop out of a doorway, or
Yeah.
even like when you go into classrooms, the like lined with desks, like you don't know. There's a lot
And
of like hidden areas.
mm-hmm.
It's not like big open spaces.
Especially like whenever you go to high school, generally the high school is a lot larger than your middle school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of anxiety as a student going there for the first time where it's like, where do I go? Where's my locker? I don't know where things are. Am I going to be late for my class and stuff like
And
that?
they really take advantage of a lot of those things because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it's like, okay, well, where do I go? And usually there is a locker somewhere that you're going to have to find.
Mm-hmm.
It was someone's locker, but you will have to find it. And they really take advantage of a lot of those, I guess, fears that we would have had
Yeah.
as like high school age kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and they're really using those elements that you have in the back of your mind against you, per se, because like those are different things that like you did experience and live through, and it's kind of like it's triggering those because it's like sometimes I feel that way like going through Midwich because it's like whoa where does this hallway go again,
yeah.
like until you're there for your like second year or something like that and you got a really good bearing on where everything is and stuff like that, you're green. You don't know where everything is, and it's
No.
just like jumping into a new level of a game. So yeah. But setting aside some of the genres that are generally used, just to go through them
Outside of horror.
outside of horror is whenever generally these are the ones that are used whenever it's a main focus of the game. There's generally RPG elements, visual novel elements is a really big one. Maybe not so much here because we're not very keen on visual novels as a mass audience in North America in comparison to Japan. There's certainly some people who like them, but the topics of those generally happen during like school days or like slice of life or work and stuff like that. And that's usually the backdrop of where it takes place, either at your house, at their houses, or at the school and stuff like that in your job and stuff. And the last main genre, so to speak, which isn't really a genre where it's used, is, as I mentioned earlier, is where characters a main focus of it. I tend to find games such as like Life is Strange or Persona, even maybe Bully to an extent, because there is a story behind Bully.
Oh, it's an amazing story.
Yeah,
Come on, it's a Rockstar game.
yeah, and that's really more character focused games,
Yeah.
and the uh, the games just kind of lend themselves well because school is a time where you're meeting a lot of people. Like for a lot of people, school's where you had most friends in your life. Like
Yeah.
sure, with the advent of like social media and stuff like that, you have all these friends, but like out of those 500 people, how many do you actually are you actually friends with and hang out with? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you're not
exactly. How many of
seeing
those
them
people
every
do you
day.
see on a weekly basis?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably not very many. Well, it's kind of neat that you mentioned the character design aspect of it.
Mhm.
Is that I find when you're you're playing something that tends to or that's using school
Mhm.
as that setting, like you have these very defined and almost stereotypical cliques.
Yeah.
Always, you've got your like your jocks and your nerds or geeks,
Mhm.
and like the drama kids, and maybe the like, uh, I guess like auto shop kids.
Yep. Definitely.
Like
There's
that's a big
many
one.
different ones. Yeah.
But you have all of these like, I guess well known cliques, and like yeah, most of us have been through high school, and like yeah, you see groups of people that hang out together, and
Mhm.
maybe they shared a class together,
Yep.
but you don't have like 15 kids that hang out exclusively at the auto like class
Mhm.
working on a classic car, and you don't have like 10 kids with pocket protectors and glasses sitting in the library playing Dungeons and Dragons or like working on science projects on lunch because
Yeah.
they don't want to go outside.
Right.
Like you don't have that. Like
No.
you have unique people, whereas these games tend to give you these like
Overly
almost
defined
like yeah,
characters.
like one-dimensional cutouts of like, well, this is what a nerd is. This is what
The
a
jock
jock
is.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they don't really have that added layer of dimension to
Yeah.
these characters.
Yeah, unless it's one of the main NPCs where they do add in more development to the characters.
Ah,
They're generally used not as dominant as the backdrop characters, but your other NPCs are generally labeled in one of the cliques. And I find it's interesting because it basically, especially in the social aspects of these games, allows you to basically have a game which has many of these different cliques, and you as a player, whether you associate more as a jock or a geek or a drama kid, can basically relate more with some of these other NPC characters and put them in your party and something like that. You might like
that's
the
true.
one geek character more just because it's more relatable to you, and it allows like maybe two very different people to enjoy the very same game because they can experience it in a different way through their dialogue and options with their group of friends in the game. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the Final Fantasy series or the Persona series as examples, because like each of the main characters are they are a stereotype per se. Yes,
Yeah,
they're multi-layered.
they do fit within that like
Hmm.
mold, but they do have
Yeah. Yeah,
personality.
especially as you interact with them more. And in like Persona, like your playthrough might be more with some of the characters, where my playthrough might be with a totally different character, because we're different people, and we just like to we just like different like people, right? Like it's we relate to them more due to our circumstances or our backgrounds, or just generally what we like.
Well, yeah, my playthrough of Persona 3,
Hmm.
um, because I at the time I did kendo,
Hmm.
so when they're like join one of the athletic clubs, I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to join the kendo club,
Yeah.
and of course I hung out with the people from the kendo club more often,
Right.
and I had a bond. I mean, I'm sure they were the same people if you went to the tennis club, or maybe it was badminton. Anyways, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
I'm sure they were the same people, just a different sport, but I spent most of my time with those people
Right.
because that is what I identified with. I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're kendo people. I get kendo. Yeah, let's go hang out."
Yeah. And lastly, the main protagonist in some of these games is generally someone who moves in between all of these different cliques. And they're generally the neutral kid trope.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like the blank slate. They're the person who doesn't necessarily fully identify in one of the cliques, but they're kind of multifaceted, where their interests lie in almost everybody's.
Yeah, it's the I can go anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more for you to imprint upon. Well, just like I said, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, kendo, I get kendo. Yeah, let's go play kendo."
Yeah, exactly. And since the NPCs are sort of designed, the main NPCs are designed in the way that I just described, this allows the player to essentially just go into the game the way that they want, and allow different types of playthroughs and stuff like that, so that the availability to do that is there. And it's not necessarily just a streamlined story that maybe just has different factions or alignment that's the difference, and it's more of the people that you're hanging out with rather than the morals of it or something like that.
Yeah,
Those will be in there as well, but
exactly. But again, it's that having a different experience each
mhm,
time, because you're going to say, "Well, okay, yeah, I hung out with all the kendo people last playthrough,
yeah,
and that was my main focus. I'm going to spend more time hanging out with the like
hmm,
drama club people this time
yeah, exactly,
and get, a better feel for their story."
hmm,
But I also find it's really neat how a lot of these things kind of incorporate like school activities
hmm.
within the game. Um,
It's unfortunate how most of the games don't do this.
Yeah, no, it's really neat. Like if you're gonna have school as like a setting,
Hmm.
you really should, I don't know, like don't like lean into it super hard and make it a crazy educational game, but even like Life is Strange had some elements where you're sitting in a classroom,
Yeah.
you get a question based on how you answer that kind of
Hmm.
dictates some things. The ones that I was kind of thinking of mostly were like Bully,
Hmm.
where you actually had to go to class and
Right.
you could get in trouble for cutting class or getting bad grades.
Yeah.
And those were all like mini game based,
Hmm.
but they were all sort of related to the subject.
Yeah.
And then the Persona ones were the most obvious, where you randomly get questions throughout the day.
Hmm.
Maybe the teacher will call on you today, maybe not.
Yeah, because the Persona ones actually, like they enable your leveling basically, right? So if you answer them in certain ways, they basically
Yeah,
help certain stats.
if you answer them correctly, your like I want to say intelligence
Hmm.
goes up.
Right.
Whereas you get no bonus for a
Just
wrong answer. It
or yeah.
just you miss that opportunity to gain
Hmm.
that. And then all the Persona games have tests as well,
Hmm.
where you actually have to like complete a test, which it generally is like a I guess a compilation of a bunch of the questions that have been asked. So
Right.
you have to remember the correct answers and then fill them out on the test, and then also based on your intelligence score will kind of dictate the overall. So I mean, it's neat that it actually gives you that aspect of it
Right.
instead of like shying away and just being like, yes, you're just gonna talk to people, you're gonna fight some people,
Hmm.
you're gonna eat some ramen, and the game's gonna end.
Right.
Um,
And
but oh man, I even Final Fantasy VIII.
yeah, because that's more
How did
part
I
of
forget
this.
Final Fantasy VIII?
Yeah, because that's part of the story, really. Because a lot of the actual Final Fantasy VIII story is about, like a Balam Garden.
Yeah, and you have to take your seed exams like
Hmm.
I think 4 times throughout the game.
Yeah, 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
But the intro of the game is basically taking your first one, which is capturing a Frit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but there are like sit down in class exams that you can take.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I said, it's neat when they lean into it, but I wouldn't want to see someone go like super hard because then you just end up with
I
like,
already did that.
well, yeah.
So to finish things off, let's talk about some video games that actually do have a school setting in it. The first one.
And interestingly enough, we went chronologically with all of
Yep.
these. So, River City Ransom was the first one that came to mind when I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking of like school video games. And this is
Yeah, I
another.
forgot this was a school setting really, because you're school kids that are going around. Yeah.
Well, yeah, your girlfriends get stolen by or kidnapped by a rival school,
Mm-hmm.
or your friends are getting or your friend gets beaten up.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the story. All I know
It's a
is
beat 'em up.
yeah, but it's an open world beat 'em up.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But what's kind of neat is it is set in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and it also relies on the stereotypical cliques
Mm-hmm.
because your main characters are the like greasers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's if you've never played River City Ransom, you
It's a
should.
lot of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of a marvel for the time.
Yeah. Our next game is a PlayStation game that came out in '97 called Rival Schools. Capcom made this game.
Didn't this also come out on the Saturn?
No, it didn't come out on the Saturn, Ian. We unfortunately were dying at that point and didn't get a copy of this.
Oh no.
So this is basically a beat 'em up game with the backdrop of it being high school kids essentially, and each of the characters are basically different cliques. Like
Yeah.
there's a jock and there's like an athletic kid and
It's
so
sort
on
of
and so
even the
forth.
same kind of story as River City Ransom.
Sort of, yeah.
That's
Like if you even really want to pay attention to the
I
story,
guess that's
but
true, yeah.
it's an okay game, but it's an interesting game, especially since like this is like the one example that we could think of that was like a fighting game that
Yeah.
was in the school genre. But yeah, yeah, and there's a game that you played a lot more of than I did.
Yeah, this was kind of the first, or not the first one that I thought of. Obviously, it was River City Ransom when we were thinking about this, but I've mentioned this a few times throughout the episode, and
Hmm.
that's Bully.
Yeah,
Um, if you haven't played Bully, it is available. It is available to download on most current gen platforms.
yeah, it was originally a PS2, a Wii, and 360 game in 2006, but you can basically find it on almost anything.
Yeah, I think they've got like updated versions on most consoles.
Hmm.
I played it on the PS4 recently, and it's fantastic.
Hmm.
It does have a very 1950s kind of vibe to it,
Right.
even though being in like a current setting. And again, you have those very stereotypical cliques. You've got your nerds that are doing science and playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Hmm.
You've got your jocks that are like way over the top jocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everything about this game is a lot of fun. It's if my high school was if my high school experience was as much fun as this, my high school experience would have been totally different. I mean, this is basically like a Grand Theft Auto for teens.
Right.
So it was controversial at the time,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, especially yeah,
in retrospect, like
that wasn't that bad.
no, not at all. Like you get in a bit of a fight every now and then. The main character's got a slingshot,
Hmm.
which you can shoot stink bombs at people. That's kind of funny. Yeah, no, everything about this game was really enjoyable. I did want to throw out a mention to Danganronpa.
Hmm.
I hope I said that right. I probably didn't.
That's
But
fine.
it is entirely set in a school. It's a lot of like finding a crime scene, investigating, and then you actually do like a class trial,
Okay.
which is kind of neat. Again, I didn't play a ton of it, but like it's entirely in a school
Right.
with students. It's it's weird.
Hmm.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and that's available for. There's like 3 of them now, right?
I think there's 4,
Okay, and that's basically available on almost all the current platforms.
at least PS4, and I think the Vita.
Okay.
Oh, and PC.
All right. If anybody still has
Probably
a
not the
Vita.
Epic Store.
Yeah. And the next game on our list is Lollipop Chainsaw. Yeah, this game came out on the PS3 and the 360 in 2012, and it takes place at a high school for most of it, and you're basically this one character, Juliet. who is basically just turned 18, and there's a zombie plot that's happening, and it's an action beat 'em up essentially, where you're just running around fighting zombies, and there's interesting bosses that you fight where that kind of just split up each of the different chapters and stuff like that. You have different abilities and whatnot that you gain and have, and yeah, it's pretty. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of it's funny. Like you have your boyfriend's like severed head on your side that talks
Yep.
to you and stuff like that, which is there's some interesting dialogue in there and everything. And yeah, it is what it is. But like if you like action oriented games, this is definitely something that I think that you should check out if you
It's kind of just like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but
with the
zombies
chainsaw.
instead of vampires and chainsaw instead of wooden stakes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. And the next one on the list is Life is Strange.
One of these days we'll get through an episode without mentioning Life is Strange. It fits
Maybe.
into everything though.
Yeah, it kind of does. This game came out in 2015. It's on many consoles, and
I think you can play it on your smart fridge.
maybe, yeah. Yeah, so it's about the story of Max and Chloe. If you want to know more information about it, or Ian's experience from it, there's previous episodes that we've talked about it. It's a really great game. If you've never played it and really like story-driven games and character development and stuff like that, the Life is Strange series is a very great series to look into. And the first one and Before the Storm both take place with the school in the background, so it's one of the main areas that you're in for most of the game. Ian?
We couldn't make it through without talking about Persona.
Well, this is kind of like the main game in the genre,
Yeah,
so
it's big.
yeah.
I think the second one was the first one that was set entirely in the school.
Okay.
Because I do remember wandering around the town in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, really three on, those were the really big ones.
Mm-hmm. And his other like dungeon crawl RPGs also take place in a school as well, but I haven't played them as much, so I'm not really like I don't have much information on them other than what I could read. But yeah.
But yeah, I think as far as something set within a school,
Mm-hmm.
with that kind of backdrop, n- I don't think anything's done it quite as well as Persona.
Yeah, probably not.
It's the social mechanics are outstanding. It really gives you a different look on how school could have been
Mm-hmm.
For us. I mean, for some people it might be a little bit more run of the mill, but
Right.
for us North American kids who went to a bland public school,
Mm-hmm.
this series kind of really shows you how different things could have been
Yeah, and
in a very different setting.
and it allows you to interact with a lot of interesting different individuals through different playthroughs that you may not have been able to or had at your school whenever you were growing up either. Because
Yeah, you might have been in the student council and you wouldn't have been hanging out with the jock kids,
yeah,
or
exactly.
the opposite way around, right?
Hmm. Or maybe there wasn't as many geeks at your school, and you want to hang out with some of the geek characters in those games or whatever. It's all entirely up to you. How
Choose your
you
own adventure.
Yeah, choose your own adventure.
Now, I think you had one last mention, didn't you, JC?
Yeah, I think it kind of does a disservice to mention the Persona series without mentioning the Trials of Cold Steel, because it's actually a game that's very similar that I feel a lot of people don't necessarily know about.
I do not know about this.
It's part of the Legend of Heroes series, but it's its own sub-series of it called Trials of Cold Steel. There's two of them out currently, and there's a third one coming out this October,
Oh,
actually.
okay.
And it's very similar in the aspect that the main premise of it is a school, and also because you're part of an academy in this case, and you essentially have the same social mechanics that you would have in Persona. They are a little bit different, but you have basically the different characters that you can interact with, and through your daily life and stuff like that, and it goes through the day to day, basically, kind of similar to Persona. The main aspect of the difference in between Persona and the Legend of Heroes games that's different is its story. Whereas the story in Persona is
You're usually like
yeah.
fighting through dungeon levels of this,
Hmm.
uh, I guess, reverse world,
Yeah.
more or less.
In this game, you basically are academy students that come from different classes, whether it's the social upper class or lower class, and there's a bit of a dynamic between that and it sort of being kind of normalized at the academy. But you're part of class 7, and you're essentially asked to investigate this old schoolhouse, which has various different floors that you have to go through, and you kind of uncover what's going on at the old schoolhouse, and that's the first game. um, I personally haven't played it that much, sorry, but it is a game that I have that's on my list and in my stack of games. It's just a game that I haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
It is a little bit longer of an RPG, uh, but it does have very similar beats that the Persona series has, and I've seen many people on Reddit and like GameFAQs and stuff like that state that like these games are very very similar, which is one of the reasons why I picked it up, because I'm like, okay, well, this should be a very interesting game, and I don't think they're the one thing I do think that they're actual sequels of each other. So
Oh, okay.
instead of it being a completely separate like game and year and stuff like that, I do think they're either like in the same universe or they're direct sequels of each other. Like I said, I don't know too much about it. But if it sounds interesting to you because you're a Persona fan, I would definitely look into it a little bit further, and maybe pick up the game on a sale or something like that. It's available on the PlayStation 3 and 4 for the first one. Also on the PC, I think it might be available through the Steam store.
I think one of them's available on the Vita too.
Yeah, a lot of these like Xseed NIS games and Atlas games were available on both the Vita and the PlayStation 3 in that
Rest in
era.
peace, Vita.
Rest in peace, Vita. But yeah, so that kind of brings us to a close for this episode on school setting and video games.
Congratulations on making it back to school, kids.
Yeah,
Play
yeah.
play some of these video games to take yourself to a little bit of a better school.
Yeah. So yeah, if you made it this far and you liked the episode, be sure to give it a like. If you like the content, and yeah, stay tuned every week for our podcast episode, which comes out every Wednesday.
And don't forget about the bargain hunting show on Tuesdays. And I
Hmm.
believe you have something special as well, JC.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be doing some new commentary episodes on either things that we couldn't cover in the episode, and I felt like I wanted to elaborate on a little bit, or just something that happened during the week that I found interesting that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to be releasing those episodes on Fridays. So, yeah, lots of content to come, and definitely stay tuned. We'll see you next time.